It's a Friday edition, orange and blue today. Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, Denver Broncos, and a to-do list that isn't yet complete, Mace.
Yeah, not quite, but then again, what's today? March the 21st?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're not supposed to have a to-do list that's complete on March the 21st. What you want to have is a viable starting lineup by the time you get to the draft, so you can put people off of any sense as to what you're going to do draft-wise. And that's why maybe you want to find at least one running back to where if you had to line up that day, you can say, yeah, we'll start him in week one if we have to. But you don't have to have every item completely checked off just yet.
Not just yet, but we are getting closer to the NFL draft, which means George Paton's in his element, man. I love this for George. I love George Paton being a scout. That's what he does best. That's how he's able to find talent. That's how he's able to build this Broncos team as a draft and develop team. So we'll get into some pro day conversation. We've got an update on a now former Bronco there as well. But that to-do list still has running back on it, in my opinion, Mace, whether it's insert name, Jamal Williams, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins. As of this recording, I don't think any of them have been signed. Please don't sign before the show goes live. But that is
reveal. Did you just do the reveal that we're pre-recording this?
That's fine. Hey, we got things to do. It's a Friday, baby. But I would say, like, it's not just for the smoke screen. It's just I want a lot of competition in that running back room, Mace, and I want more. I believe in some of the guys there, but I want more competition in that room.
Yeah. You want a situation where somebody good, somebody of quality, somebody who can play in this league doesn't make the team. You want a surplus.
Yes.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I believe Blake Watson can play in this league. I believe Audric Estime can play in this league. And it's possible that if the Broncos bring in enough at running back that maybe one or both of them doesn't stick.
Right.
Of course, last year, someone who can play in this league didn't stick, and that was Samaje Perine, who moved on to the Kansas City Chiefs. So you could say that already happened, but I think that was more about wanting to see what some of the young guys could do. And I think also with Samaje Perine, that was simply a calculus where they were going to keep one veteran, that decision had already been made sort of in the roster planning deal.
Yep.
And Javonte Williams, in the coaches and personnel executives' minds, seemed to prove that he had enough left in the tank once he shed the weight that Sean Payton suggested that he shed after meeting with him during OTAs and minicamp. And look, he did look faster. He did look quicker. He did look like he had that burst to the coaches. He looked like that to all of us.
Right.
I mean, I think we all came out of preseason and training camp believing that Javonte Williams was all the way back. And it turned out that was not the case. And despite having the best offensive line and run block win rate per ESPN analytics, that's one of those phrases I say a lot, I know, but you have to point out that despite having that, he was sub 4 yards a carry, and that's why he's not with the Broncos anymore.
Yeah, and it was Javonte or Samaje last year, and that may be the case. They may add, I don't think with J.K. Dobbins necessarily, but if they were to add a Nick Chubb, who I love, there's no guarantee he makes the roster. Jamal Williams, who I love, like, there's no guarantee he would make the roster. Mm-hmm. It's just adding a competition, because in the draft, you don't know who you're going to get. You don't know who's available. We've gone over the names. We all know about Omarion Hampton at 20 and others. So I just like the idea of stocking the shelves. And then if the shelves are a little full, yeah, you can let somebody go, maybe even possibly a trade. Somebody gets hurt in training camp. Hey, can we get Jamal Williams from you? Here's a 7th rounder. Just something like that. Just more surplus, I think, Mace, is the word I'm searching for.
Well, the interesting thing with Jamal Williams, if he signs somewhere else, then that means there's an intentionality to someone signing him, and there may be less of a chance of picking him up at camp because a team may see him for a specific role and may have him in their plan to have him as part of the room, even if it's on the back end of it. So the best chance to get Jamal Williams, pardon me, if you want him, it might be right now. If you see him as a fit in the room, the best chance might be at this moment. And if you did bring him in, it would be for what he is right now, not what he was. I mean, he is a plow horse back at this point. He's going to be someone that you know, if you were talking about it, say in baseball pitching terms, he'd be a fifth starter in a rotation who was an innings eater. That's kind of what he is. You'd say, give him some carries, first down, short yardage, send him up the gut. That's kind of what he is at this point. J.K. Dobbins still brings the threat of doing something spectacular. The thing with J.K. Dobbins is you have to accept the fact that he's probably going to miss time because of injuries. He's never played a full season in his career. He played 15 games back in the 2020 season. But since that 2020 season, he missed all of 2021. He missed a couple of games in 2022. He missed all but one game in 2023, and he missed 4 games in 2024. So that's the reason why, as we record this, J.K. Dobbins is still sitting on the shelf, because as the cliche goes, the best ability is availability, and he just isn't available.
Yeah, just not available. So we'll continue to see what happens there in the Broncos search for running back, which also includes some pro days, Mace. Concludes pro days, and there's some days coming up that are very impactful in terms of, okay, where's George at? I think where's Sean at is important too, in case Sean Payton falls in love. Because if he falls in love with an Omarion Hampton, Sean's probably going to want to move up real bad. Yeah. Maybe George prevents that. But I think maybe taking attendance is what we'll be doing. And the Broncos scouting staff always thorough in what they do, with George Paton leading the way. So we'll be taking notes of which pro days they stop at.
Of course, today was the Big 12 pro day down in Texas. We get to next week, we start getting toward the individual school pro days. Next week's the biggest day for individual school pro days. So we get to Monday, if we're talking about running back pro days. Caleb Johnson, Iowa, is on Monday. Omarion Hampton, North Carolina, is on Monday. Brashard Smith, SMU, is on Monday. We get to Wednesday. Ashton Genty, Boise State, is on Wednesday. Quinshawn Judkins, Trevayon Henderson, that's Ohio State. That's on that's on Wednesday. And then we get into some others throughout the week that are going on as well. So those are the big ones. But there are others. I mean, it's, there are others that you go through throughout the week as well. Tootin, the Virginia Tech running back, he also works out on Wednesday too.
Okay. Yeah. So I think next week's shows, it'll be following George Paton. Where in the world is George Paton? And with all these backs, I mean, Mace, I feel like we don't give enough time to RJ Harvey or Jordan James. You know what I mean? We have our favorites. We've got guys we've seen at the Senior and the Shrine. We've got guys at the top of the list that we talk about regularly, but it's such a thick class. There's days I sit down and I'm like, Mason, I haven't even talked about Jordan James. You know what I mean? Like there's so many backs where it's like, that guy's an option. That guy's an option.
Jordan James is somebody the Broncos had a formal meeting with at the Combine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we barely talked about him. So just think about that. That's how thick. Mel Kiper in the conference call that you were on said 31 draftable grades. And I told Josh Dover on Thursdays, Dover and Cecil, I said, you know how many draftable running backs there usually are every year? The number's about 15. Chad Ryder, our buddy from NFL Network, said double draft. Mace, we're staring at a double draft.
2-2.
All right, Chuck Woolery.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we talk about getting a veteran running back. Well, if you decide to double draft, you really need a veteran running back.
Is it again smoke screen? Yes, but I also want more competition. I don't think Jamal Williams necessarily says, oh, they're not taking him back at 20. J.K. Dobbins does. Makes teams doubt that.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of a cloak and dagger nature this time of year. Teams are trying to figure out what other teams are. Peyton's even alluded to it. Both Peytons, by the way, have alluded to the cloak and dagger nature of it's not just doing mock drafts. They're trying to figure out what other teams are trying to do right now. So as they go through that, maybe a J.K. Dobbins would be a nice, like, hey, running back maybe at 20 isn't the option. And maybe it isn't based on this class and, well, based on best player available.
The only other thing, and we talked about this earlier in the week, is also just if you look at this class and say, okay, we can get what we want later. I mean, look, there are two real difference-making backs. We talked about it on Thursday's show that if you believe Hampton and Genty are the special backs, and I think they're the transformative backs that you plug them in right away and you can instantly transform your team. And I think part of it is also kind of the Broncos maybe are in a different situation than they were 12 months ago. If the Broncos were coming off a 6-11 season, I think maybe the discussion would be different. I'm not sure we'd be talking about plug, play, expect to carry them to a division title. I think maybe we'd be talking about looking at something more foundational. Right. But you're coming off of 10-7. You're coming off of a couple of years also that you've spent really rebuilding the foundations of the team. And this is where you have to give the Patons credit for how they went about rebuilding the team. Now, they were fortunate in going in the rebuilding of the team. First of all, they were fortunate they inherited some good parts that they were able to use.
Right.
But some of the turned out like Garrett Bowles, George Paton comes in. John Elway had just re-signed Garrett Bowles. And now Garrett Bowles has another contract. So that's a good part that George Paton inherited. And then George Paton drafts Quinn Miners and develops him. And then Sean Payton likes him and they get him signed to an extension. Sean Payton comes in his first offseason, signs Mike McGlinchey and Ben Powers. And that you rebuild the offensive line. You do that inside out building. So that's your foundation on offense. Defense, you spent that first offseason, you bring in Zach Allen. That second offseason, you bring in John Franklin Myers and Malcolm Roach. The second offseason of George Paton, 2022, you brought in DJ Jones. Now you've re-signed him. So you see that inside out building that's going on. You're building the foundation inside out. Because you've done these things, and then, of course, you got quarterback right, and you, just like this year with running back, you took advantage of a year where quarterback was unusually deep. You're not, you 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks. You've never had that before. Like, just how often do you have 31 draftable grades for running back? I mean, that's exceptionally rare. You might never see that again for 31 running backs potentially in 7 rounds. So you took advantage of where your needs mesh with the draft strength. So because you did all those things, because you rebuilt the foundation of the team, now you're in a position where you're closer than you thought. The object named the Broncos is closer than it appears to the Kansas City Chiefs in their rearview mirror, perhaps. And if you give it a little oomph, like a Hampton or a Genty, you can close that gap perhaps a little bit faster. I mean, that's why we're talking about, okay, do you consider maybe the audacious move up to get one of those running backs, because this team maybe is closer than previously thought, but it's only closer because of the work of the last off seasons, because to their credit, the Broncos went about this the right way. And in the last couple of years in particular, since Sean Payton came in, really that first offseason of Sean Payton, with the big signings being trench signings, when you didn't have the draft capital, but you invested heavily. offensive lineman, defensive lineman. And because you hit on those, because they made those areas better, markedly better, you've been able to solidify those and then build out. And that's why we're sitting here today saying, okay, you have a really good offensive line. Now you just have to get the right running back behind that. You have a really good offensive line. You have an intriguing, exciting young quarterback. Get the right running back there behind it. Kind of like Philadelphia got the missing link, as in the parlance of Mel Kiper Jr. with Saquon Barkley, and then see what happens. That's why we talk so much about these running backs, because that might be the one missing piece that takes this team to a level it hasn't been to in a decade.
In the words of Anthony Daniels, I'll just say, closer. Yeah. Yeah, man. You're building this thing not to, they don't think they're a year or two away. It's my opinion. They don't think they're a year or two away. Hell, Mace, I don't think they're a year or two away. If they get the right back, we shall see. As we wrap up today's show, let's talk about Lil Jordan Humphrey, LJH.
Yeah.
Is he a wide receiver? Is he tight end? Is he a Denver Bronco? We have an answer for one of those questions, Mace.
Yeah, he's a New York Giant now.
The answer's no. He's not a Bronco.
So does that make Lil Jordan Humphrey a Lil Giant?
Annexation of Puerto Rico coming up.
By the way, how did a youth football game in semi-rural Ohio have a broadcast with a broadcaster and everything? What the heck's going on in Urbana, Ohio?
As long as Rick Moranis is involved, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good, man.
So yeah, I don't know if the Giants are going to be running the annexation of Puerto Rico, but they do have Lil Jordan Humphrey there. They showed a picture of him signing his contract. He's now a New York Giant. He's not a Denver Bronco. The guy who played 50% of the Broncos' offensive snaps last year.
Craziness.
Think about that for a moment.
And not many people would guess that number. You've dropped it before, and it's somewhat revealing. It's a revelation for some out there.
It's a revelation. I'm not sure that a lot of Broncos fans like hearing it.
No, who takes the spot, though? You know what I mean? Because LJH, obviously, Sean Payton favorite, obviously involved in the offense.
Yes.
Those snaps are going to somebody now.
Well, I think part of it was Devon Vele moving up the speed dial.
Yes.
There was a good chance that, and I thought Lil Jordan Humphrey, if he wanted to come, we talked about this. If Lil Jordan Humphrey wanted to come back, he was going to come back. Well,
sure.
Lil Jordan Humphrey's not coming back, but it's because he wanted to go elsewhere. He saw more of an opportunity with the Giants. I think that's sort of the key thing here. This may simply be he saw more snaps going to Devon Vele. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was the possibility of him getting some tight end snaps as well had he come back. He's a bigger wide receiver, only a few pounds to where you could have been talking about him as a tight end. He certainly was the best blocking wide receiver in the room last year. So him going to tight end, it wouldn't have been much of a stretch. By the way, if you're going by snaps, among receivers and tight ends, just to kind of go through how much he was used, 936 snaps for Courtland Sutton. Next is Adam Troutman among receivers, tight ends, 574. And then Lil Jordan Humphrey, 546. Right, followed by Devon Vele at 447. So he's got more snaps than anyone not named Troutman or Sutton among the receivers and tight ends, to tell you how in favor Lil Jordan Humphrey was. And by the way, that's a guy who started the regular season on the practice squad. Of course, that was procedural, as y'all remember.
Right.
So I think there are a couple of things. Number one, they're probably going to add somebody to the room. We keep talking about veteran receivers. I think, remember, they didn't add Josh Reynolds to the room until just after the league meetings last year. So don't be surprised to see a low-cost veteran brought into the room here in the next couple of weeks. Second, we've talked about A.T. Perry. He can certainly move up on the back end. He's in the mix as well. I think, I don't know if they go round one. We've talked about Teteroa McMillan being an option if they don't go running back, if the running backs are off the board at 20 and you go in another direction positionally, but certainly wide receiver is not out of the question to add to the back of the room as you go deeper into the draft. So there are going to be others coming into that room as well. But Humphrey, I think Humphrey saw kind of the room closing a bit.
Sure.
I mean, I think whether you're talking about Vele simply getting a little more work, A.T. Perry coming behind, if he was to get tight end reps, they bring in Evan Ingram. I think they're going to add another tight end in the draft. You can see why he might look at the landscape and detect the squeeze coming to where he says, I've probably got a better chance to be on the 53 if I move on to the Giants. I'm actually not surprised he'd go to New York. I just figured if he went to a New York team, it would be the Jets with Aaron Glenn and, of course, the Aaron Glenn, Sean Payton connection rather than the other tenants of MetLife Stadium.
Right. Well, we'll see coming up for the Denver Broncos. Who's on George Paton's to-do list? You tell us in the comments down on YouTube. Mace, also, how do people help us out on YouTube?
Like,
comment,
share,
subscribe,
hit that notification bell
so that you
never miss
vid. That's right. Hope you all doing that at home with us. He's Andrew Mason. You follow him on all the socials at Mace Denver. I'm at C Salami saying OBT's BFD. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay frosty.